All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So, hello and welcome to the Voices of QLF webinar series. I am your host, Alex Morris, and we're so excited that you're able to join us in this episode today. So, before we get started today, I thought that I would share just a few updates on how the webinar series is going so far and some little statistics that Bill Steelman, our producer, shared with me. So, today marks our fifth episode of this series. We've had four to date that we host monthly, and we launched this in October. We've featured 11 wonderful guests, I should say human guests, and then we have had two non-human guests, which are the notorious puppet and the hyena that was able to join us for this last episode. Um, in terms of our kind of global reach here, we've traveled from the US to Canada to the UK, and then on to Lebanon and Jordan. So it's been really fun to connect with people really from around the world. And today we'll be joined by two guests from the Czech Republic who we're excited to welcome to this series, and Beth will be introducing them shortly. It's also just exciting to see the global presence of all of our attendees. We've had hundreds of people join these webinar episodes, which is really great. And I think it's about 20 countries from around the world. So it's just wonderful to see that level of interest and engagement with this series. And thank you all for being a part of it. And just personally, it's great to see so many familiar faces who I haven't been able to connect with since the last QLF Alumni Congress. So very excited to have you all with us. And we also just want to thank all of you who have reached out in many different ways, sending in questions and comments and well wishes throughout this series. We hope you'll continue to do that. You're welcome to email any of us individually or to reach out to qlf@qlf.org with anything that you want to share. It's always great to hear from everyone. So and then if you're interested in watching any of our past episodes, we post all of our recordings on the QLF website, which is at qlf.org/voices. So you can view the episodes on repeat, for all of the greatest hits moments. And if you'd like to share any of them, you're welcome to do that. So I'd now like to turn things over to QLF President Beth Alling. So Beth, if you could turn your camera on, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you for hosting this webinar series and doing such a great job of that. Now I'd like to have our guests turn on their video and audio while I make these introductions. Thank you so much. It really is a great honor and pleasure to introduce QLF alumni Blažena Hušková and Mirek Kundrata, who join us from the Czech Republic. And here in New England, we're joined by QLF Senior Vice President Brent Mitchell, former Senior Vice President International Programs Jessica Brown, and QLF President Emeritus Larry Morris. Considered pioneers by many, Blažena and Mirek will share stories about the conservation movement in the Czech Republic, with its focus on engaging private initiatives and creating dynamic partnerships with a community-based approach to conservation and stewardship. Blažena was the founding executive director of the Foundation for the Jizera Mountains in northern Bohemia. Blažena hosted QLF's second Landscape Stewardship Exchange in Europe and collaborated with the QLF Regional Women's Leadership Program named Babynec. You'll hear more about that later. Mirek leads the strategic development initiatives for the Czech Environmental Partnership Foundation, a key QLF partner organization. Under his leadership as director over 27 years, the foundation has supported community-based projects rooted in environmental protection and civic engagement. Blažena and Mirek attended the first QLF Congress in Hungary in 2006 and the second in Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain in 2016. Brent Mitchell has served with the organization for more than 3 decades. Jessica worked for QLF for more than 2. Jessica is currently the executive director of the New England Biolabs Foundation, also based in Ipswich, a private foundation whose mission is to foster stewardship of landscapes and seascapes and their biocultural diversity. Together, Brent and Jessica have worked in Central Europe since 1989, leading QLF's Central European Stewardship Program with a primary focus on the Czech Republic and its neighboring countries. And lastly, Larry Morris, QLF President Emeritus, is our ambassador at large, a role that serves QLF well, for he has been with the organization for nearly 48 years, 35 as president. As you will hear, each of our distinguished guests have created strong programmatic and personal bonds between QLF and our Czech partners. They are, in fact, our stars, really our superstars, responsible for some of the most important and enduring work in conservation over the last 3 decades. Now I'd like to turn this over to Brent Mitchell to provide an overview of QLF's work in Central and Southeast Europe to set the context for this webinar.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, in planning for today, we felt the need to provide some context for why an organization called the Quebec Labrador Foundation is so deeply involved with the Czech Republic and neighboring countries. I certainly never guessed I'd be working in the region. But when the political change began to sweep through Central and Eastern Europe in the late 80s, a number of US foundations committed to helping in the transition to democracy. These included the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, German Marshall Fund of the US, Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, and others. And rather than disperse grants from New York or DC, they decided to pool their resources and create foundations in the region. The purpose was to promote civil society, and particularly through the unifying issue of environment. One such program was the Environmental Partnership for Central Europe, first in Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. And Jessica was asked to advise on setting up the partnership in Hungary, traveling there initially in 1989. And these funders knew that they would need training assistance in leadership development and conservation. They knew the quality of the work we had done in other regions. We were approached by Bill Moody of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, who'd been our program officer for similar work in the Caribbean, and at about the same time, the US State Department, who encouraged us to apply our Latin American programs in Central Europe. We started in the time leading up to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Velvet Revolution. In 1992, Jessica and I put our brand new son on my back and traveled around the region, getting to know the countries and people from a base in Prague. The Environmental Partnership, led by Mirek in Czechoslovakia, then Czechoslovakia, were key to introducing us to emerging leaders. The challenge was fascinating, to support NGOs in a region where anything non-governmental had been, well, somewhat discouraged. We adapted our Latin American and Caribbean programs to needs of the region. We also adapted a decades-long land planning program between the US and the UK and later Canada called the Countryside Stewardship Exchange, which Blažena will talk about. Thanks largely to the quality of people we found as partners, we found success working with some amazing NGOs, most of which are still active. You'll soon hear about women's leadership empowerment. And we promoted private land conservation in a country where private land was anathema for a generation. There are now 65 land trusts owning nearly 400 areas around the Czech Republic and more in Hungary. Many of these areas are small in area, but significant for what they protect. We also worked with other pooled funds, first in the Baltics and later in the Balkans, to move people across the Atlantic. We had support from the US Information Agency and from the Trust for Mutual Understanding, which I want to mention because I think it's the best name ever for a philanthropy. Much has changed in the region since we were most active there, mostly for the better. But we're seeing new challenges to civil society in some countries. Bill Moody and others recently wrote up the experience of these pooled funds we assisted. And the main thesis is that developing civil society is multi-generational work. Perhaps it is time for philanthropies to step up again for a similar initiative, sort of like the second booster shot of a vaccine. So that's a little history, but we continue to assist the region in some ways that I'll mention later. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you, Brent. That was wonderful. I always admire what you've all accomplished in your partnerships over many years, and I sure hope this webinar gives each of you the recognition that is well deserved. And now we'd like to share some photographs of our guests and their work in region. There are stories that are relevant to each photo and emblematic of a long-term conservation partnership. And I'd like to call upon Mirek first to
Yeah, good.
comment on these photos and the story
Hello.
behind them.
Yeah, hello everybody. Thanks, Brent, for the very good overview. I underline, every word you said. It was really also for us a big personal experience to meet you both, and I think the value of this meeting was that you were so in-depth interest and understanding the circumstances of the region. You were not lazy to travel, to every corner of the of the country, meet the people on the local levels, and you really were one of the best informed people about the situation in the region. So it was, I think, very, very valuable. And what was important that you always have had the capacity to uh, you know identify our needs and how to improve the situation, bring the experience from other countries, as you mentioned, from South America and from other areas of your work, and the biggest, I think, the biggest word, which is still semantically very difficult to translate into the Czech language and into the other Slavic languages, is this stewardship. We were also debating that the concept, part of the problem of our landscapes and of our land conservation, was that the stewardship concept has disappeared, and we simply focused only on the state conservation or the we did not take in account the ownership of the land and all this social network and working with other stakeholders, and that was something which working with QLF brought back to the region. I think what was most important was that we started together with Jessica to this fellowship trainings. So we were since early 90s from the budget of Environmental Partnership funding the groups of fellows going to New England, a couple of years, and be exposed directly to the land stewardship concepts and to what to the success of New England organizations and partners and leaders, and those people, we managed to create a little pool of Central Europeans who understood the concept. And then the second wave was introducing these land stewardship workshops, which were trying to help local communities to solve their problems in conservation, and there were different topics moving around the country. And the White Carpathians was the really beginning. Here are couple photos where Jessica and later Larry have met. For instance, this old man was a beautiful guy, Jan Pivečka, the same age of the old Bata owner of Bata factory, and he was out of the country 40 years. When he came back, he started the local foundation. He gave his property to the local nature conservation club. He supported them. He understood, and he brought back to the community the responsibility and the atmosphere of giving, participation, and helping others. He invested a lot to motivation of young people, students, and his motto, "Never give up," is on the picture. And I always, when somebody came from abroad, I always try to visit with the guests, Mr. Pivečka, because he was so inspiring and giving a context of what this country came through under the communist regime.
Could we have the next slide?
Yeah.
Now we come to my place. We move now to the little bit to the north and little bit to the west, straight north from Prague, about like 100 kilometers, in the area which was in the past called the so-called Black Triangle, the place where air pollution was a really difficult issue, and like generally pollution of the environment. And here we are in the place which is called Friedland, the town, the beautiful castle. And it's the Friedlandsko, so-called Friedlandsko region, and Jizera Mountains. And I would like to mention my very special time with group of people, local people, plus experts coming from abroad. And it was the Landscape Stewardship Exchange program led by Brent Mitchell at that time. And I met Jessica, of course, like connected with this event. At that time, I was one of the co-founders and director of the Jizerské hory Foundation. And our mission was to reforestate the mountains, which were deforested as a result of like heavy air pollution load in the 70s and 80s and of the last century. And it was a huge task, and we raised quite a lot of money, especially from abroad, and we planted trees, and we tried to save the genefund of local trees, and we did a lot of reforestation on the area of about 100 square kilometers with like hundreds, thousands of volunteers. It was really enormous, big part of work. And I think in 1996, somebody came up with the idea that this area, environmentally very fragile, and just recovering from this ecological catastrophe, where we really spent like several millions Czech crowns, could be the place where the international world ski championship could take place, which would mean a huge clear cutting of trees we newly planted and old trees in thousands of hectares, building hotels, facilities connected with sports and so on. And, you know, at that time, I found out pretty clearly that we can spend millions of Czech crowns in planting trees. We can work with millions of volunteers. But if the local people and the decision makers and mayors and people who live in the area won't understand why the forest up in the mountains is needed, why is it so important, if we really don't make the effort and talk to them and understand their needs and like help us to understand us, so lots of our effort will be in vain. And at that time, Jessica and Brent came up with the idea of Landscape Stewardship Exchange. And it was like kind of like opening my eyes, because it was the beginning of really like public discussion in our place, means like Friedlandsko and Jizerské hory Mountains. Try to imagine that during the communist time, like public discussion was really not something which could happen. And also we live, Jizerské hory Mountains and Friedlandsko is the region where all the traditions were broken after the Second World War, when the original German people living here for centuries were forced to leave, and new settlers came, and they had no deeper connection to the land and to the place. they had no roots there. They had to learn about the landscape, about the history, and so on. And so the Landscape Stewardship Exchange was a great tool for me. And really, like, thanks to QLF, I just learned how to use this tool to organize group of local people. They were like mayors, business people, people from NGOs, people from public sector. And we created a team of organizers, local organizers, and we discussed for more than half a year about the problems and the needs and about the positives of the land where we live. And then we tried to create good questions for a team of experts who came from abroad, and they came from the United States, from Great Britain, from Poland, from Slovakia, and we guided them through Frýdlantsko and Jizerského Mountains, and we asked them our questions, and they gave us some responses. And I remember many years ago, Brent, at that time, he mentioned that he was surprised that, for instance, the local leaders, they never really discussed issues of common concern that really we are not used to. And through Landscape Stewardship Exchange, we began to do it, we learned it. And if you look at the picture on the right side of the slide, so there is Jessica, me, and Jitka Doubnerová, who is one of my wonderful friends and leaders. And now Jitka, since 2005, she just continues doing what the Landscape Stewardship Exchange began. She is the head of the so-called local action group, which works on the territory of Frýdlantsko and part of Jizerského Mountains. And she does an excellent work as community leader of this whole area.
Move to the next slide, please. Thank you.
Yeah, this is one of the first workshops in the area of White Carpathians, and this visit to the wine cellar is part of the social program at the end of the field excursion. So you see Jessica with her glass of white wine. What I think is also adding what,
right?
yeah, Katka is there. Yeah, I think what is important to say about White Carpathians, it's similar as in the Jizera Mountains. The problem and challenge of White Carpathians was the permanent conflict with landowners and nature conservation administration, the national park or the protected area administration, and there was the classical situation, like Blažena said, positions of different interest groups and no dialogue, and I think that the first workshop brought really opening of this dialogue and follow up to this workshop. There was a common mowing the meadows with the local landowners, one summer, and the dialogue between the mayors, landowners, and state nature conservation, and of course the volunteers, the Kosenka, Mirek organization in Valašské Klobouky has been opened, and people started to look at it differently.
Wonderful.
And
Thank
just for those who don't know the region, the mowing of the meadows is important for maintaining the biodiversity. It's not.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the very first photo in the meadow with the two Mireks, Mirek Kundrata and Mirek Janik, because for me that was a powerful moment of education, learning from them that it was that mowing, as Brent described, that it was responsible for maintaining the biodiversity of the orchids in particular. And as we have gone onward to work on biocultural landscapes through IUCN, the Protected Landscape Specialist Group, of which Mirek is a member and has provided case studies. We've brought out to the world some of the examples of how in this part of Central Europe, this kind of community-led management is so important to maintaining biodiversity. The conservation world doesn't always realize that.
One of the successful land trusts, were created by Mirek Janík in Valašské Klobouky. Not only protecting the orchid meadows, but also the forest, virgin forest. They are buying now pretty big areas of the forest with the help of people, donors to invest in the virgin forest creation.
Wonderful, thank you. Blažena, would you like to comment on these photos and the map and whatnot?
Sorry, Jessica should begin because it was like her idea that Babynec arise from.
Sure.
I'll start, but you have done so much to carry it forward. I love this program and the legacy that it continues, even to this day. So Babynec grew out of the women, you can see it on the slide there, the Women's Rural Community Leadership Program for the Czech and Slovak Republics. And it really did grow out quite organically from the work on landscape stewardship that you've been hearing about from Mirek and Blažena. And but it was also for me an experience of realization, because when the call for proposals from the State Department, the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, which funded our work along with Rockefeller Brothers Fund, German Marshall Fund, and the Trust for Mutual Understanding, when that call for proposals came across my desk, I looked at it and thought, well, women's leadership, that's nice, but we are focusing on landscape. We are focusing on rural areas, and we really have a lot of work to do. And this would be, silly me, not relevant. And then I took a second look and thought, wait a minute, it's often, in so many cases in these communities, it's the women who are leading. It's the women who are leading the NGOs. It's the women who are the mayors. And you see on that slide a number of women mayors from rural villages in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. We saw similar in Hungary and Poland. It's the women who are caring for the cultural heritage and the traditions, and we see them in certainly in people like Blažena and Jitka, but bringing this group as a whole first to the US for an exchange, and then we had reciprocal exchanges, we had retreats, we had a traveling seminar in Central Europe some years later focusing specifically on culture and cultural heritage, incredible learning opportunity for so many of us. But what was so exciting was how this group immediately coalesced, supported each other, and named themselves Babynec. And I'll let Blažena explain what that means and maybe also how it continues to this day.
Yeah. For me, Babynec was really something very formative, I must say. And Babynec, the name is Babi. It means women, but not, how to say that?
It's like crone. I think it means like crone.
A little bit like witches, maybe a little bit like women and witches together, which we usually are, kind of like women's club or something like this. It's a kind of a little bit of joke in it, hidden, but everybody understands it. And we named our group on the first traveling seminar in the United States, which was in April 2000. And we met there 10 women from Czech Republic and Slovakia at that time. Maybe if we could go back to the previous picture, because on this is Larry, yeah, but on the this was from the first trip, and here we really traveled around the New England, and it was so important because when we had Landscape Stewardship Exchange here and other activities, what we definitely needed was building capacities. And this was exactly one of the things which happened here. We learned so much, and it was not only about like we learned a lot about like the power of networks. We learned about leadership skills. We learned about facilitation. We learned about like successful stewardship. We saw so many examples. We learned about how to prevent conflicts and how to resolve conflicts. We learned about environmental education, and we gained lots and tons of inspiration, both from our hosts in the United States, but also from each other. And really, like, I would say that there here arose friendships, personal friendships, who last for more than 20 years. This was the first group of women. The second one followed, I think 2002 it was, or fall 2001. And I think until today, we are still in contact. Then followed some seminars in Czech Republic and Slovakia and Poland. And I believe that there were at least 50, maybe 60 women who came in contact with this group and with these like opportunities brought and inspirations brought. And this is wonderful. We still do communicate. We still do help each other. One of Babynec members was some help because of being ill and having some problems several years ago. We raised the money and helped. And it's just wonderful when we know still about each other. And this is really powerful. And there was one more thing. When you look on the picture on the right side up, so it's Katka Rejcová, me, and Delia Clark. And I would really like to mention Delia Clark, and I would like to talk about her later, because I learned so much from her about place-based education, sense of place, building relationship to the place, of the importance, because this is what lays behind successful stewardship. And one more woman, Ruth Feldman, which is on the very right side of the colorful picture of the group, because she did a good piece of work with Babynec too.
She did a lot. Thank you for mentioning both Delia and Ruth. And I want to mention one more dimension of that program, because it was unusual for QLF up to that point. And that was that we had interpreters who are shown in this picture, who were wonderful. They came from the State Department and supported this group. And it made this opportunity accessible. Had we only recruited for people with bilingual skills, especially in that period, we would have missed some of the best leaders, women leaders from those communities. So it was the first time for QLF, but it carried out through the Women's Leadership Program, bringing in that dimension of interpretation. Isn't it days before Google Translate and little buttons on your Zoom screen that do the translation for you?
Yeah, may I have one more comment? If we go to the next slide, so you will see there, there is a copy of the letter. Maruška Matušková, one of the mayors in one of the small villages close to the Polish border here from Frýdlantsko region, after she came back home from the first traveling seminar in the United States, she felt so empowered, and she felt so like she decided that we learned so much as Babynec, and we learned skills which our whole country really needs and doesn't have. And so she sat and wrote a letter to President Václav Havel at that time. And she really explained him the whole program and what happened during our traveling seminar and what we learned. And she simply offered the skills and help of all Babynec members to his office. Like, if you need anything we learned from the US and from each other, here we are as Babynec, and we stand to your help. And this is the answer of President Václav Havel's secretary, Anna Freimanová, to Maruška, saying like the president was really pleased to hear and just he knows about Babynec and he is really happy this happened. So I just wanted to place it here because it showed how we felt, how empowered we felt, and how important we felt that the skills we learned and also the ethics we brought was important for everybody in this country at that time and now. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Next slide, please. Brent and Jessica, would you comment on this and what it means to you?
Do you want me to start, Brent? It means a lot. 5 years ago, Brent and I were really fortunate to have an opportunity to return to the Czech Republic after what had been a lot of years, at least a decade, maybe not quite that, since an earlier visit. And we were there because we serve on IUCN's World Commission on Protected Areas, and they were having a steering committee meeting actually in the north of the Czech Republic. And that was great. And then there was an optional field trip after the meeting at Krivoklát, a protected landscape area. And we went on that visit and no one knew our history with questing or with QLF, but as we arrived at the visitor center, there was this very familiar sign about questing, and this had been through the collaboration that Blažena forged with Delia Clark and Mirek and other groups were involved. Delia, based in Vermont, wrote a book about questing. It's been translated into Hungarian and Czech, right? Yeah, and through some workshops that Blažena had organized, it has been taken up. It's essentially a kind of scavenger hunt that uses the details of a landscape, natural and cultural, to lead the participants, and it's a great kind of place-based environmental education exercise. But to see that there's just randomly come upon the evidence that this was continuing, for me, felt like such an example of the legacy of this program. And it's very much, this is now way beyond the work we did through those exchanges, but how it's taken up by you, Blažena, and you, Mirek, in these kinds of collaborations with people that maybe we introduced you to, but you carried forward that collaboration. It's really
we now have
nice
here
moment.
about more than 100 quests, community quests, and more than maybe 150 community quests, and they are created exactly according to the method I learned from Delia Clark. The first quest was done or led by her. The creation of the quest was led by her in the year 2012 when she came here, and it was also thanks to the Environmental Partnership Foundation. It was in Brno, and then we really took the tool and spread it, and now it goes to schools as one of the tools of place-based education in schools. And so now a number of schools begin to use questing as a powerful tool of place-based learning. So, this is another big, wonderful thing, which is so closely connected with QLF.
If I may add, this context, we should mention Tomáš Ružička, my fellow co-director, who was taking responsibility for most of these conservation programs. And Laďa Ptáček and others who did also this local heritage interpretation methodology, and it's also a very viable tool to help, for instance, nature conservation or cities to interpret the local heritage, natural heritage to the people, and a lot of local leaders are using this method. So also one of the products which came out from our cooperation.
That's great.
All right. And Blažena and Mirek, would you like to comment on your experience at both congresses?
Blaženo, jo. Jo. I should say I remember from 2006. I remember more the field trip, because I probably came late. I missed the Budapest part, and so I remember the field trip in the Pusta and in the forest. So it was nice to meet the people, and especially we talked to the Hungarian fellows, Markus, what was his name? Ferenc, who joined later the WWF, and it was an opportunity to meet colleagues from our region who worked on similar issues.
Mhm. On the middle picture, I am dressed in black and I try to kill Ladya Ptáček. Mirek mentioned him using, like, what is it, karate or something like this, but it's not. He is one of my really valued colleagues. For me, I must say that this is something I really wanted to mention, and maybe it moves us closer to the end. I think about the so-called Econet. Do you remember something which is like you support, you design or define biocenters and biocorridors, and you try to interconnect them and support these connections so that the whole net, Econet, is created? I remember when I first came to Frýdlantsko region, I felt like there is nobody active, nobody really interested in community issues, interested in nature conservation, interested in future of the region. Then Landscape Stewardship Exchange came, and lots of people like raised their heads and began to be active. We found them, we interconnected them, we supported them, and today they really form quite a viable net of people who really help each other and communicate. And I think for me, both congresses 2006 and 2016 was about this kind of like QLF worldwide net, because this is really like I felt really deeply connected with different people in different parts of the world. I have this earring from an alumna from Peru.
Yeah,
It was unbelievable. Remember, and so for me, it's like this environmental web, natural one, translated into people, groups of people working together. So yeah,
That's such a beautiful analogy, Blažena.
Yes, and just to add, at the first Congress, Brent and Jessica led a 4-day workshop, stewardship workshop, and then Brent did the same with Delia in Barcelona. So it was tremendously exciting. And this is very unusual that Larry Morris hasn't said anything yet. But I thought you might want to comment on your
he's waiting for a Slivovitz shot, aren't you?
trip to the Czech Republic with Jessica in 2000. Wasn't that an important
time is such that I should keep any comments very, very short. I would say a couple of things, and one is that, Mirek, could you please raise your bottle from that 20-year anniversary?
Sure, Larry.
Apple factory. We have Slivovitz here, and I'm going to ask Mirek if he wouldn't mind to tell you what that is. But local traditions. I was brought over there by Jessica, and I think that's fair as my guide, and she didn't give me a choice. She said, you're going and you're going to understand why I feel so passionate about these exchange programs. And you will remember that back in 1986, QLF ran in Vermont. The program, I think the theme was developing support for conservation, where we brought 80 or 90 folks from around the world. Now, I had not traveled out of our home region, But Jessica thought that with their commitment, Brent and Jessica's, to Central Europe and the funding that had gone along with it and the incredible work that they had done and the extraordinary people that they had connected with, two of whom are here today, that I had to see it. I went over and my life at QLF, probably beyond that, was changed. I became one of their big supporters, and they needed my big voice, my bullhorn, to advocate for what we were doing as a US Canadian organization, working across borders, if you will, in this case, in Central Europe. Well, I became that spokesperson for them. And Jessica, thank you for a trip I'll never forget. And Mirek, with that, na zdraví, everyone.
Na zdraví, na zdraví. Na zdraví.
Tell people what.
Yeah,
what
this is a plum brandy coming from the plum trees which are randomly grown on the White Carpathians landscapes. You know, so they are these extensive orchards which are part of the historic landscapes and also part of the livelihood of the local people, you know, taking not only plums for slivovice and destilling, but first of all, plums for making the jams and drying them. In the history, it was an important part of the livelihood. They were selling the dried fruits to Vienna or to different bigger cities and little money for their lives. But it's important part of the landscape, and it was one of the land stewardship workshops in White Carpathians was focused on local traditions and how to you know, translate the heritage protection also in the economic activities. And we started the traditions for White Carpathians, which was a certification for local producers. We were trying to encourage and help marketing local craftsmen and local producers to come with their products and be proud of the origin from the White Carpathians. And one of the outcomes of this project was establishing the local juice plant, juice factory, apple juice factory in my home village Hostětín, where we are now it's in operation for 21st year, this year 21, and it's very successful. I think small economy, small business based on the local products, selling high quality juice, even high quality apple acid now to the whole country and to Slovakia as well.
Great. And can I
and it's owned. What is interesting, this plant is owned by the consortium of NGOs. It's not a classic. It's of course a business, but it's owned by the NGO. So the idea behind was that the outcome from the profit from the company can at least partly go back to this educational and nature conservation activities of the NGOs.
And as Jessica will attest, we would go into meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning, and never did a meeting go forth without having a toast and a shot, a drink of slivovitz to bring good fortune and good luck to the meeting. I thought it was a wonderful way to do any meeting, and I always felt better having had it start that way. So I hope
it also helps you to overcome the COVID, you know.
and finally, for everyone, you saw the slides. I did not choose them, but I was not. I advocated to be included in the Babynec, and I was rejected by them. I did everything I could to get myself into the group. But anyway, a wonderful group of folks that were over here representing the Babynec. Thank you.
Larry, try to apply for the second time.
You lowered your standards, you see.
Oh dear.
I sure will.
If you send the application with a bottle of Slivovitz, you might be.
You might have a chance.
Thank you.
This has been so much fun and so interesting, and we're starting to close in on the hour, believe it or not. It always goes much faster than I ever, anticipate. Before we conclude this wonderful episode, I just wanted to call upon our guests to comment on what are your hopes for the future in a world of pandemics and changing climate? Where do you see hope? What keeps you going?
Do you want to start, Blažena?
I start and then I close. I am not very optimistic generally. I think that, and maybe it's the result of the recent COVID situation, because I really miss to be in contact with people, with friends. My work is not to sit online and talk to people. It's just being in one room with them, or in one place with them, on one meadow with them, and just see everybody, touch everybody, hear everybody, smell everybody. You know what I mean? There is such a big part of communication, which is not in words, but like non-verbal, and I miss it so much. But there is one hope I have, and I really, this is something which really is pretty important for me. And in these my thoughts, I come back to Delia Clark, because this is something what I really, this is the inspiration from her. And it's the importance of place and relationship to the place, and love of the place, and belonging to the place, and knowing a lot about the place, and being a good steward to the place, maybe where you live, but when you have all this in relation to the place where you live. So I think that you feel respect also to other places and other people for whom these places are their home in the rest of the world. And so this is something which really is now my hope, and like the biggest part of my work. Just connecting people and places begins with kids and ends up with like adults, and I do it through place-based education, and questing is part of it, and also through the local heritage interpretation in the Association for Heritage Interpretation we have here, and Laďa Ptáček is the head of this association. And so I believe really that taking our personal responsibility for the place we live in, that this is big part of my hope for the future, because very often we feel like somebody will come and save us. I live in a small village, and somebody will come from the big town, from the big city, from Prague or from Brussels or from New York, and will help me, will save me, will help me to survive, will make decisions instead of me. And I think this will never happen, and it's simply an ill concept. Yeah. But developing and supporting the connection to the place, and feeling responsibility for the place, and being a good steward of the place, I think this is something which for me is a hope for the future.
Yeah, I agree, Blažena, that being rooted gives you not only bigger self-confidence and orientation in this crazy world, but it also provides you better resilience, which I think is resilience is a key word for the future. We see it, and we see how close the resilience in the sense of the, you know, climate change and nature resistance is important, but it is very similar to the human immunity against the diseases. And so we are now, I think it's chance for us, this COVID crisis is a chance for us to make the public more understand how important is the balance in the nature ecosystems, and it is so similar to our to the society and vulnerability of the society. So I think we should take the opportunity of this big challenge and you know, work on the change of the perspective. And I think part of the population is ready to even change the behavior, so I think this is the hope for the future, that the younger generation is more sensitive. You know, the women, mothers are more sensitive to the warnings we are getting from this crisis. So
Mirek,
I'm
yeah, I
positive in
was
that.
thinking such a similar thing, and I just want to comment on it because what you said about resilience and immunity, you know, Brent started us with that image of the vaccination booster. And as Blažena, you were speaking too about, you know, not just connection to place, but connection to each other. And you spoke earlier about the Landscape Stewardship Exchange and what it meant in a period of re-democratization in your part of the Czech Republic. The challenges we face right now in this pandemic, and we could use the idea of syndemics, you know, synchronous pandemics, and one of them is climate change, and another is the trend away from democracy in too much of this world. And I know that that's something we haven't touched on here, but I was thinking about how that work, you know, is maybe like a kind of inoculation, that it gave some immunity early on, that there's something in our memories, right? And also our connection to each other, that three-dimensional experience that you described, Blažena, of being with people versus flat two-dimensional contact like we're enjoying right now. You know, we're riding on that for now. And I think your stories especially remind us that it's not just last year, but even 20 years ago and moving forward that has given, you know, us all a foundation to build on in a really difficult time. So it's very hopeful in that way.
And maybe just a quick word on the future, lest we leave the impression that all of our work in the region is history. We are somewhat still involved. While we had success with land stewardship in the Czech Republic and Hungary, less so in Poland, but recently there's a new project to promote privately protected areas in Poland, and there's a group that's translating our guidelines on privately protected areas into Polish. We'll be working on that. And we also advise UNESCO's World Heritage, and there's a pending nomination to protect the ancient and primeval beech forests in 10 countries of Central Europe. In the Czech Republic, that means Blažena's Jizera Mountains. And I'm hoping I'll get tapped to do the field evaluation for that one.
You might be too biased, Brent.
Larry, do you have some final thoughts here?
Well, I'm still in the game, probably more because of the people on the screen and so many like them. Each of us has a role to play, and the problems, the challenges are big enough so that if I can do a small part in moving forward, or simply being able to help enable those that are so much better qualified to represent us, it's their turn, and I look forward to helping do just that.
Thank you so much. This has just been wonderful, and thank you, Blažena, Mirek, Brent, Jessica and Larry, and thanks to our staff who've worked tirelessly on this webinar series. And I want to also invite you to the next episode on March 18th with alumni Miguel Rafa and Marta Subera from Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain. Miguel is the Director of Territory and Environment at the Catalunya La Pedrera Foundation. He manages the largest system of private land conservation areas in Catalonia. Miguel participated in one of QLF's first exchange programs for young conservation professionals from Europe. He attended the 2006 Congress and was a key partner and host of the QLF Congress in Barcelona in 2016. Marta is the Secretary of Environment and Sustainability for the Government of Catalonia. She participated in several study tours to New England organized by QLF. Marta's office was instrumental in developing a land stewardship network in the country. And with assistance from QLF, the Land Stewardship Network has grown to include other regions of Spain and much of Europe. Marta also attended the 2016 Congress in Barcelona, presenting at the final session. Once again, thank you for being with us today. All the best and be well.
Yeah, great to see everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ahoy.
Ahoy. Ciao.
Nashledanou.
Ciao.
Thank you.